Hello and welcome back to Get Up in Game. My name is Josh, and in this video I'm going to be doing an overview of the Nemesis encounter sets for every single hero in Marvel Champions. I'm going to be discussing their themes and how well they interact with the hero, and then I'm going to be ranking them by difficulty based on how much trouble I think that Nemesis set gives the hero if it were to be drawn early in the game. I think the Nemesis system in this game is actually one of the things that gives it the most flavor and theme to be a fully comprehensive superhero game, but we don't really discuss them very much. And I think that's just for a very simple reason, is that they can be a little bit unreliable. You know, we have this card, Shadow of the Past, and this is the primary way that's going to bring your Nemesis set into the game, and it's only one card in the encounter deck. And unless you're D20 Woodworking or Steve Kimmel, you might not see this card every single game. And so, as awesome as the Nemesis encounter sets are, they're just a very intermittent occasional part of the game, and they've done a good job of adding more cards into the game that will bring your Nemesis into play so that we get to see them more often. And I have a couple of them represented here for the categories I'm going to be sorting them into. We have the Whispers of Paranoia encounter set that goes along with Mysterio that will bring your Nemesis into play and give it an extra hit point. And then we also have the Analysis Paralysis side scheme that will go and find your Nemesis set side scheme and bring that into play. And then there's a card, an Expert 2, that brings out your Nemesis minion, and there might be one or two more else in the game somewhere. So we're starting to see our Nemesis encounter sets more and more, but for as interesting as they are, you just might rarely encounter them. I will say for myself as a player, I feel like I rarely encounter them. So maybe that's why we don't discuss them very often, but I'm also using this video to say thank you to the 1,300 people that have subscribed to my channel. Every 100 subscribers, I like to make a special video, and I feel like I just did this the other day with the solo rankings video, but your incredible kindness and generosity towards me for subscribing to my channel just blows me away. And but it seems like we got this 100 pretty quickly, and when that happens, I like to make a special video that's outside of what I already had scheduled for myself to do. So I honestly wasn't prepared to have one of these ready so quickly. So thank you very, very much. And if you do enjoy this kind of content, and you aren't subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel so you can see what comes along next. And when thinking about what could I talk about that I wasn't already planning on talking about, I realized we never talk about the Nemesis encounter sets. So I thought that this would be a really fun thing. Now there are 41 of them to get through, so I'm going to try to go quickly. The way that we're going to be doing this is I'm going to be approaching this as if you were playing a solo game and you drew Shadows of the Past on like the first or second turn. How much is that going to wreck your game? Is that going to cause you to scoop, to just start over? Is it going to cause you to shrug, like, this will be fine? Or do you simply give a hearty sigh? All right, we got to deal with this. So scoop is hard, sigh is medium, shrug is easy. That's how I'm going to be rating them. And I want to do it from solo just because in multiplayer, it's always easier to handle this sort of thing. So it's more, if you're just playing alone and you pull shadows, how are you going to react? When you see Shadows of the Past on the first, second, maybe third turn of the game before you're set up, how much trouble is it going to cause you? Now, of course, these rankings are purely my opinion, and this is just for fun. And this is a little bit tricky because, like I said at the beginning, we don't see these all the time. So it's very likely I've never played against many of these just because you only play a hero so often and Shadows of the Past either comes out or it doesn't. So a lot of this is just how I think the cards interact with the hero and how much trouble I think it'd give them. It might not be based on personal experience, so I just want to be upfront about that. But these things are really fun to talk about, even if my ranking isn't absolutely perfect. And I have them sorted in the order that the heroes were released, so we can see how the designs have changed or maybe even improved over time. So I think that'll be a really neat thing too. All right, that's enough intro. Let's get started with the core set. First off, we'll take a look at Spider-Man. He's got the Vulture. 4 hit point, 3 attack minion with quick strike. So I think this minion is really nasty. The highway robbery side scheme is going to make you discard a random card and put it down here. That's never fun. Random discards are some of the worst effects in card games. And then he has these sweeping swoops that are going to go into the encounter deck. And when they're revealed, it's going to stun your hero. And if the Vulture happens to be in play, the card gains surge. And then the boost might also stun you. And then the Vulture's plans also makes everybody discard a card at random. Is going to add some threat to the main scheme. So kind of how I want to approach talking about this is, first of all, how much trouble are you going to be in the second this happens? Because you're going to have the Vulture to deal with and the side scheme. So you're always going to have 2 new cards to deal with. So Shadows is always bad just because of that. You've got 2 cards instead of 1. So how much trouble is the hero in dealing with Vulture and highway robbery? But also, how much harder is the rest of the game going to be because these cards are shuffled into the encounter deck? So that's kind of how I want to approach the difficulty discussion. And I think for Spider-Man, he might be in real trouble if this comes out early, because he's already not super great at dealing with medium-sized minions. You know, he can only punch for 2, and he probably defended on the villain phase. You've got this guy coming out. He's going to hit you for 3. You're probably taking it unless you happen to have an ally to block. Discarding cards at random is always a problem because you just don't know how bad that's going to be. I think the stuns aren't too bad that get added to the encounter deck. And then the Vulture's Plans is another random discard. And some of these cards in the Nemesis sets that add threat to the main scheme can be a real problem too, because anytime the encounter deck is adding threat to the main scheme outside of the villain scheming, that is a real variable that just kind of introduced into the game that can cause you to lose at a moment's notice. So I'm tempted to start off with a scoop here. I think if I were playing Spider-Man and I wasn't set up really quickly, the Vulture came out, you might be in real trouble. But just because I know there are way worse ones down the line, we're going to call this one a hearty sigh. You see this, you're just like, ugh, okay, let's see if we can handle this. I don't think you would quit. I don't think you would scoop. But I think the Vulture is going to give you a lot of trouble. Next up is Iron Man. You get Whiplash with 4 health, Retaliate 1, 3 attack. The Nemesis minions are always so beefy, which I think is really cool. You get this Imminent Overload. This one's just an acceleration that's going to have 4 threat. I don't think that's too big of a deal. It's not going to be great because Iron Man, especially early in the game, which is what we're really thinking about here, you know, he's already probably having trouble managing the threat because he's going to stay in Alter Ego. And now you've got this acceleration in play. And these electro-equip attacks are either going to deal damage to you based on how many upgrades you have, or you make you discard an upgrade, which is going to make it really hard for Iron Man to set up. But they're going to the counter deck, so you might not see them right away. And then the electromagnetic backlash is just going to do some indirect damage based on lightning resources, which if you're playing Iron Man, there's a good chance you've included those in your deck. This is similar to Vulture, where I think it's definitely a problem. I don't know that you would just start right over. And that's, when I say that, that's sort of like hyperbole. Like, you probably aren't going to just scoop and start over, but that's kind of the general idea. Like, does it make you want to just start over? So I think this one's on pretty par difficulty with Spider-Man's, where it's definitely going to cause you some trouble, but I think Iron Man could overcome it. Maybe not though, but this is another kind of a higher sigh. Like, this definitely not going to be good. Now, She-Hulk's on the other hand, I think this one is a real menace. You get Titania, who has 6 health, and then her attack is equal to remaining hit points. So she comes out with a 6 attack. Now, assuming she doesn't get some sort of effect that allows her to attack right away, which is unlikely, She-Hulk's going to be able to punch her for 3, and then she's got 3 of the 1-2 punches in her deck, so she could very likely stand back up and punch her again. So you could probably knock out Titania, or at least reduce her health enough to where she's not hitting quite so hard. So I don't think the minion, as scary as it looks, is that bad. The problem is this personal challenge right here. This side scheme, it's a crisis. It is going to have 4 threat on it in solo. I don't have the faintest clue how She-Hulk is going to be able to deal with this before it causes her to lose the game, because she's already not super great at managing the threat in solo. And I should say, this is, when talking about this, you know, I don't know what kind of deck you're playing when this happens. So this is just more how well is the hero able to overcome it. Yes, you might have allies in play that can immediately thwart this away, or you might be playing Justice. This is just more like, in general, how capable is the hero of dealing with this sort of thing. And I think She-Hulk is very incapable of dealing with this personal challenge. The other cards are really cool though. This goes on the menu with the highest printed hit points. So if Titania happens to be out when this comes out, this is going to give her 3 more hit points, which is going to get her up to 9, which she's not out. Now she's attacking for 9. I think that's amazing design. And then there's 2 copies of this Titania's Fury that if that causes Titania to attack you, and if not, it's just going to end up surging. So I really like this set actually. But I think if this came out on the first or second turn, She-Hulk would pretty much be done. So we're going to call that our first scoop. Next, we'll take a look at Captain Marvels. You get Jan Rog here, a 5 health minion with 3 attack and 2 scheme. And after he attacks, he's going to place a threat on his side scheme that is simply just a hazard that gets in an extra threat. It seems like definitely with these core set Nemesis side schemes, they were all pretty much just very straightforward, no special abilities. They were just going to have one of the main symbols and then add some extra threat to it based on the player count. So nothing really too scary there. Carol isn't amazing at thwarting, but she should be able to remove 4 threat relatively quickly. And this guy only has 5 health, so 1 Photonic Blast can take him out. Captain Marvel's just so strong. I feel like this wouldn't cause her too much trouble. And then we get these cards that get added to the encounter deck. It's going to surge and place a little bit of threat on the main scheme. Not great. I said this before, but I definitely think the cards that are going to start just putting threat on the main scheme are bad, but it's only one, so you need to be aware that they're in there, but it's not too bad. And then Yanrok's Treason is going to cause you to discard each lightning resource from your hand. This one could absolutely wreck you, but thankfully, since it gets shuffled into the deck, there's a good chance it might show up later, so it's not going to cause you too much trouble if you're trying to get set up to start the game, but it could. So this one is, I think, really kind of swinging for the fences here. Like, that's a huge, huge card that could maybe do nothing or could really, really hamper you. But I think overall, this one isn't really too bad. If this comes out, I don't think Carol's going to have too much trouble dealing with it. So I think you see Yanrog and you just kind of shrug. Like, okay, fine. That's what I'm doing this turn. No big deal. And the last one in the core set we're going to take a look at is Killmonger. He's got 5 health. He's a 2/2. And the thing with him that's interesting is he cannot take damage from Black Panther upgrades. I think this is a real problem because there's a really good chance, unless you're playing aggression, you're really relying on your upgrades to do all your main damage. You know, one Wakanda Forever can easily take this guy out with the Panther Claws and the Energy Daggers, but he won't take damage from any of those, so you have to use your basic attack, or if you happen to have attack events, which again, if you're not playing aggression, you probably don't. We get another very basic side scheme. Now, the thing that's horrible about this one, I know we're mainly talking about playing solo, but this one has 3 per player. So if you're playing 4 players, this thing gets 12 threat. This is the type of thing is why they introduced Hinder a little bit later into the game, because that does not scale. You don't want a side scheme that's got 12 threat on it. It's causing you an extra encounter card every round. Now, if you're playing 4 player, 1 extra encounter card is not that big of a deal, but still, that's just really made me laugh when I saw that. And then you get this heart-shaped herb. It's going to surge and give the villain and each minion engaged with a tough status card. Could be bad. And then you got the ritual combat that's going to discard the top card of the encounter deck, and it's going to either deal damage or place threat based on the boost icons. I think this one is trouble. I don't think it's a scoop, but I think Killmonger might be out there for a couple turns, hitting you for 2. Now, thankfully, you've got the retaliate, so you could punch him for 2. He hits you, you retaliate, and then you could finish him off on the next turn. So he's not terrible. And I don't think these cards make the encounter deck much harder, but I do think that's kind of funny that in 4 players, that's going to be there for a while. But we're going to call that a Sigh. It's not quite a Shrug. He is going to be there he's going to hit you a couple times most likely, but I don't think it's causing you to start the game over. So we see in the core set, we have one that I think is a little bit more than the hero's capable of handling. One that the hero's, I think, is going to have no trouble handling. It's not nothing by any means. And all of these, the timing of it is so critical. So this is just sort of in general. But I don't think Hero would have too much trouble with Yanrog. And then 3 that are sort of right in the middle where I think they should be, because I think they should be harder than your average encounter cards. It's the Nemesis. The whole concept of how the Nemesis works in the game. You're off fighting Ultron in some epic battle, and then along comes Killmonger just to, pick up some old personal grudge with you that's got nothing to do with the scenario you're currently battling. That's kind of hilarious, actually, if you think about the theme of that. Like, I'm a little busy here, Killmonger. Could you come back later? But because that's such a random thing that can happen, they should be a little bit harder. But you don't want them to absolutely wreck your game. So this is really probably where we want most of them to be. So hopefully that's where they largely land. But I will tell you, there are some, and I'm sure you're already thinking of who they are. There are some that are going to end up over here that are just so insane. But we'll get to them soon. Next up is Captain America with Baron Zemo. So you've got a 5 health minion with 3 attack anytime. I think 3 is particularly high on a minion, and 5 is also a really annoying number because most heroes can punch for 2. So when you see a minion with 5, it's going to require some sort of extra attack event, or you're going to need to add in some allies. So I think that's kind of a magic number. 4, you can take him out in a couple punches, and especially Cap, he can discard a card, he can attack for 4, no problem, but 5 health, it's going to cause him a little bit more trouble. But again, similar to Black Panther, you're going to have retaliate, most likely with a shield, so that'll help deal that extra damage. And while he's engaged with you, you cannot thwart. A lot of these abilities, that sounds really bad, but because you're going to turn all your attention towards trying to kill him as fast as you can, usually this type of text isn't going to be a problem. Now, he comes out with Quick Strike, so he's immediately going to hit you for 3. So he's pretty much immediately going to take a retaliate damage. And then assuming you didn't defend, you'll be able to just punch him twice. So I don't think he's that bad. He's going to hit you for 3 most likely, but then you'll probably be able to punch him out on your turn. And then the rest of the encounter set is pretty much stuff we've already seen in other modular encounter sets. We get the Hydra soldiers that are in the Hydra Patrol, 4 health guards with an extra encounter card when they're defeated. They're really not too bad. And then his side scheme, it's when revealed in player order, each player discards the top card of the encounter deck and takes a damage for each boost icon discarded this way. Okay, that could be pretty mean. You're going to take a little bit more damage. So he's going to come out and he's going to hit you a little bit. You're going to take 3 damage most likely, and then you're going to take a little bit of damage from this. And then you get the Hail Hydra, which is going to bring out a Hydra minion at some point, or if you happen to be engaged with Hydra minions, they're going to cause you to attack. I think this one's pretty wimpy, to be honest, partially because Captain America is so strong. And, you know, these cards, most of them are from a pretty easy modular encounter set. I don't think we think of these cards as very hard anyway. So I'm going to say that this is a shrug. This pops out, Captain America's like, whatever. Pretty much the work of one turn to remove those from the board. Next up, we have Ms. Marvel, and this is one of my personal favorites. I think this set is just really, really neat. Now, the Nemesis minion himself isn't too bad. He only has 3 health, and he's only hitting you for 1. He can't take damage when you're engaged with another minion, but, you know, hopefully you're managing the board. You don't have too many minions in front of you, especially early in the game. So I don't think he's that bad. The thing that makes him really cool, and he interacts with Ms. Marvel really, really well, compared to, you know, I should have mentioned this with Baron Zemo, like that one, other than the fact that it's Hydra and Captain America fought Hydra people, it doesn't really interact with his kit in any way. It feels like his ability should have made it so that you can't ready or something like that, you know, not thwart. But either way, I think this one interacts with Ms. Marvel's kit really well because the fact that he schemes so hard, you know, Ms. Marvel likes to spend so much time in Alter Ego. So if you don't kill him quickly, he is going to give you a lot of trouble. And then the encounter set is all about messing with your persona supports. This one's going to discard cards from the top of your deck for every persona support in play. And she's got 3 of them, and it also hits you for allies too. So this might discard a decent amount of cards off the top of your deck, which isn't the worst effect in the world, but it is kind of annoying. And it's a hazard, which could be a problem, but it's only 2 to remove, so that shouldn't be a problem. But you get this giant robot in the encounter deck. I just think it's awesome. It's got 8 health, and it can't take damage unless you spend a mental resource. And then you can damage it for the rest of the turn, but you got to do 8 damage. And if you aren't able to kill it, then next turn you have to spend another mental to start tackling it. This being in there is really a problem if this pops out at the wrong time. And then you have these 2 harvests that's going to exhaust all of your persona supports and then heal the villain based on how many that were exhausted. Healing the villain is definitely not one of the worst encounter effects, so that's not too bad, but exhausting all your persona supports can completely wreck your turn. If you're playing Ms. Marvel and you flip down because you were planning on using Nakia and Bruno and Amir, well, this popped out. You're not going to get to use any of them. So not only did you allow the villain to scheme, now you're not going to get as much out of your turn as you wanted to. So this definitely makes the encounter deck harder, but I don't think it's a scoop. I think he's easy enough to deal with, and this is easy enough to deal with, that the initial effect isn't that bad, and it's going to make the encounter deck a little bit harder, but I don't think it's too bad. Now, it does add a pretty decent amount of boost icons to the encounter deck. You know, these have 2 each and then 1, and then if these do get shuffled back in at some point, those are pretty big. But we're going to call that a Sigh, sort of medium difficulty. You can move your way through it, but you're not going to be happy to see it. And then we come to Loki from the Thor set, and this is another one that is a huge problem. Loki comes out, he's got 4 health, he's 2/2, and you might not ever be able to kill him. Every single time you defeat him, you have to flip the top card of the encounter deck, and if it's a treachery, he just stays in play. He heals all his health. So there's a very real possibility that you could literally never kill Loki. And then similar to She-Hulk, maybe even the bigger problem is this side scheme that comes out. It's only an acceleration, so it's not too bad, but it's going to get a lot of threat. It starts with 2, and then he gets 1 additional threat for every Asgard card in play. Well, Thor's going to be in play, the Hammer's probably in play, Loki's in play, so that's going to be at least 3 additional. And then if Thor has some of his other cards in play, there's going to be even more, maybe even allies if you're playing Theme. So this could have a ton of threat. And again, similar to She-Hulk, you know, Thor's not super good at managing the threat in solo anyway. And then this is going to be adding even more threat every turn. So you're probably not even going to bother trying to get rid of this because it's going to have so much threat on it. You're just going to keep trying to manage the main scheme, but it's just going to make it that much harder. And then these Frost Giants are pretty mean. Now, the nice thing about this is Thor has his Lightning Strike that ignore tough, so these shouldn't be too much to handle. Plus, Thor's happy to have the extra minions in the encounter deck. They might stun you as a boost effect as well. And then this Trickster card is going to add even more threat to the main scheme, depending on when it comes out. So I think this is a scoop. I think if you're playing Thor, now Thor would never scoop, but for the sake of the discussion here, I think if this comes out in the first couple of turns, you are going to be in serious trouble. And unless you get very lucky and kill Loki on your first try, he's just going to be hitting you all the time. And then this is just going to be making it that much harder to manage the main scheme. So we're going to say scoop, move on, play again. Black Widow's Nemesis minion is Taskmaster. He has 4 health, 0 scheme, 0 attack, so he's super easy. Except he does get +1/+1 for every upgrade you control. So you actually almost want to see him early in the game because you probably don't have too many of your preparations out and your your gauntlets and such. So he's actually one that's much, much worse if he comes out later in the game. But then if he does, he's, pretty easy to take out. And then the side scheme is pretty basic. They were starting to get a little bit more interesting. And then this one's pretty basic again. It's just going to be an acceleration with a little bit extra threat. You get a couple really wimpy minions that you're pretty much happy to have in the encounter deck. These are going to be easier than what was already in there, most likely. And then this deadly shot could discard one of your upgrades, which, it's probably going to be a 1-cost preparation, so not that big of a deal, and deal of damage. I think this one's really, really wimpy. Taskmaster is really swinging for the fences. This could hypothetically have huge, huge stats, but unless he just happens to get lucky to be able to come out and then maybe you had some more encounter cards and to gang up, he gets to attack you again. I don't think he's ever going to get to hit you with those big stats because you're going to take him out immediately. So I think this is very much a shrug. You see Taskmaster and you're not going to think twice about it. Now, one thing we haven't talked about with these Nemesis encounter sets yet is, I don't know if they've ever said this out loud, but it really feels like the design should be such that the Nemesis set matches the power of the hero. They know that they designed some heroes to be stronger than others, and I think that's a perfectly good way to do the game. But it feels like the Nemesis encounter set should be of a comparable power level. And so far, I don't know that that's true. Captain America's was really easy, and Captain Marvel's was really easy, and they're the strongest heroes in the game up to this point. And then we come to Doctor Strange, who definitely was the strongest hero in the game up to this point. Maybe still is, that's open for debate. So let's take a look at Baron Mordo here and see if he is of a comparable level. Is this the hardest Nemesis set to go along with the strongest hero? Well, he's a 5 health minion. I already said anything over 4 is kind of annoying to deal with. 2/2. And if he does get to attack you, similar to Doctor Strange's Magic Blast, you flip a card and then it might do some additional effects like stunning or extra damage. And if it happens to hit a wild, he's going to stun you, confuse you, and deal 2 additional damage. So this is another one of those that's really swinging for the fences and hopes to do a lot. But again, he has to attack you in order to actually get to do this. And since you're going to be turning all your attention towards killing it, there's a decent chance he's not going to get to. The side scheme could be real trouble, though, because when revealed, you place the top card of the invocation deck face down to the scheme. This could be any number of the 5 cards. If this takes one of your best ones, like especially if this takes the attack one, the 7 damage one, he suddenly becomes a lot harder to deal with because you don't have access to your big damage attack. And, Strange does have the Magic Blast in his deck, but they're kind of expensive. So I do think he could cause him some trouble depending on which one of these it yanks. Otherwise, it's not too bad. It's only 3 threat with an acceleration. The worst part, I think, are the cards that go into the encounter deck. These counter spells are annoying. They come out and they attach to you, and then basically they're going to cancel your next event. So hopefully you've got something cheap in your deck. If you've got Spiritual Meditation in your deck, you can use that to get rid of this counter spell. But otherwise, you might be sitting there trying to figure out, what am I going to do? Because you might have to spend a lot of resources just to then get rid of a card to then get rid of this. So these are a real problem depending on when they come out. And then the thought casting could cost you to discard a card from your hand with the highest cost and either add threat on the main scheme or take damage. And Doctor Strange's cards aren't cheap. So there's a good chance this is going to discard a 2 or 3 cost card, deal a big chunk of damage. So I do think that this is a decently difficult set. It's Doctor Strange, so he can certainly handle it. But this is definitely not a shrug. We're going to call that a sigh, and maybe even a bit of a hearty sigh, depending on when it comes out. Now, when we take a look at the Hulk here, I haven't been talking about the obligations because most of them really aren't that interesting, to be honest. You're most likely going to be flipping to alter ego and exhausting. Like that is just like the way to handle obligations 99% of the time. So they're not really worth spending time talking about. The other effect that you could do is interesting, but you're just never going to do it. But Hulk was the first one that we saw that did something different, in that this one causes you to change your form and you don't have a choice. So this one, if you changed forms and you ended up turning into Bruce Banner, it's going to discard 2 cards, it's going to wreck your whole hand. And then if it turned you back into the Hulk, it's going to exhaust you, which is pretty much going to wreck your whole turn. And then it doesn't go away. You just discard it. There's no removing this one from the game, which thematically makes perfect sense. But I just got done talking about how the set should interact with the power level of the hero. This is incredibly punishing to the Hulk, and he's not exactly one of the strongest heroes in the game. And then if we go on to talk about his Nemesis encounter set, you get the Abomination's going to come out with 6 health and 3 attack. And when he attacks you, you're going to flip the top card of your deck. And if it's a punch resource, you're going to take 2 additional damage. and you're playing the Hulk, it's probably going to be a punch resource. So if you don't kill him right away, and unless you have a Hulk smash or a crushing blow, and you aren't exhausted or stunned, you might not have too much trouble. But if you don't kill him, he's going to be hitting you really, really hard. And then you get your side scheme that only has 2 threat on it in solo, but it's a hazard, so you want to get rid of it right away. But you can't get rid of it right away while this guy is in play, so you have to kill him first before you can get rid of this. And even 2 threats, a lot to ask for the Hulk to remove. So far, this is absolutely nuts. And then you shuffle in these 3 copies of Clash of the Titans. It says the enemy with the highest attack attacks the hero or ally with the highest attack. If no attack was made this way, this card can search. So this basically gives the villain 3 additional activations, 3 additional attacks in the encounter deck. And not only that, every single card in this set has 3 boost icons. What in the world is happening here? This is the scoopiest of scoops I've ever seen. If this comes out early in the game, or maybe even late in the game, like you might have the game in the bag and this could come out and just steal it from you. Like, this is insane how terrible this is. So I like the theme. I appreciate that it interacts very well with the Hulk, but the Hulk is not remotely equipped to deal with this. So that is definitely a scoop and just kind of an insult. You know, you're already sad that the Hulk isn't better than he is. And then you got Abomination just really rubbing it in your face. Next up was the Rise of the Red Skull, and we'll look at Hawkeye's Nemesis set. So he's got Crossfire, 4 health minion with 2 attack. He has Quick Strike. That's always a problem. Quick Strike is definitely a pretty tough effect in this game because it's basically just free damage that the encounter deck is putting on you. And then one thing I think is weird about this one is his attacks gain Piercing, which makes sense. He's a sniper, but it doesn't interact with Hawkeye in any way. You know, Hawkeye isn't known for getting tough. He doesn't have any reason to have tough. So it makes sense for this character. I like the ones that really go after what the hero is doing, and this one just feels like it's meant for somebody else. And then you get the Marked for Death side scheme, which has 5 threat, which is quite a bit, especially for Hawkeye. Acceleration. And this one's kind of interesting because it makes you go get Mockingbird and put it underneath her. So basically Crossfire is capturing Mockingbird, and you have to clear this to get her back. Now, if you didn't have her in play, it's not that big of a deal. But if you did have her in play, this would really, really stink. Because one of the ways to play Hawkeye that's fun is to set up where you just play Mockingbird every turn, and then she blocks the hits for you, play her, and then you play her again the next turn. It can be really fun, so that can really interfere with that depending on when it comes out. And then you get these sniper shots that these are really, really potent. You know, they're either going to add 3 threat to the main scheme if you happen to be an alter ego, which you're playing Hawkeye, so you won't be, if you can help it. But they're just going to come out and hit you for 3 damage, and Hawkeye only has 9 health. He's not very good at keeping himself alive, so I think these are really, really nasty. And then you get this rifle that comes out. It's either going to go on Crossfire or it's going to attach to the villain, and this is something that's interesting. A lot of these Nemesis sets have some kind of attachment that are meant to go on the Nemesis minion. Most of them don't attach to the villain. Usually they just surge, but this one actually will. It's going to give him +2 attack, and it's kind of a pain to get rid of. You have to exhaust your hero and spend a wild resource, which Hawkeye probably isn't overly rife with wild resources in his kit. So hopefully you've got a power of or some other kind of special card that happens to have a wild resource. Otherwise, the villain's going to be attacking you for 2 extra. You know, I think when this comes out, this might not wreck the game for you immediately, but I think that these make the encounter deck quite a bit harder than it already was, especially for Hawkeye. I'm actually going to call this a scoop. I think it's a lighter scoop, maybe a heavy sigh, but I think that this would cause Hawkeye real problems when that comes out. So we're going to say that's one of the harder ones. The Viper, on the other hand, similar to Doctor Strange, Spider-Woman's encounter set needed to be really difficult to match up with her power level. And I'm going to spoil it right now. This is not. This is actually one of the easiest Nemesis sets in the whole game, and I can't figure out why. Yet the Viper comes out, and yeah, she's kind of annoying that she reduces your hand size by 1, but she's got 5 health. That's a Venom Blast. No problem. Take her out. Or Jess can play a couple aspect cards, punch her twice with a self-propelled glide. Like, she's going to have no trouble getting rid of the Viper. And then she has a really boring side scheme that's just going to have 3 threat and hazard. Again, very easy to deal with. And then similar to Cap, we just get some cards from another modular set that we've already seen before that if you're playing a lot of Hydra, it's kind of cool that you can add these in for some extra theme, you know, have a couple Hail Hydras and a bunch of regulars that do insight. But these are just some of the weakest encounter cards in the whole game, and they're meant to interact with one of the strongest heroes. So this idea that the Nemesis set is meant to match the power level of the hero. I think maybe that's something we made up as a player base because it does not seem to be part of the design of the game. I think these are really more going for theme rather than appropriate power level. But yeah, just that's probably one of the biggest shrugs. Jess is happy to see Shadows of the Past. It's probably easier than what else the encounter deck might be throwing at her. So all the way up through Rise of the Red Skull, the difficulty's pretty all over the place, it seems. Then we start wave 2 with Ant-Man. We get Yellow Jacket. And I like the one, this one really interacts with Ant-Man's kit. I really like that for the theme. He's a 2/2 with 4 health, so he's not that bad. And then depending on if you're in giant form or tiny, either gets more attack or retaliate. I think he's pretty easy to deal with. No real trouble there. The tech theft can be a real problem. Treat the printed text box of each tech player card as if it were blank. Thankfully, it only has 2 threat, because this can really wreck your board. It's going to turn your helmet off, your wrist gauntlets, and then just anything else you might have in play. And in multiplayer, it could be much worse. You know, with a bunch of other people playing, turning off everybody's tech. But again, it's not going to be too difficult to deal with. There's not much threat. So I like the concept of it, but it's going to be pretty easy to deal with. And then it puts these 2 size increases in the deck that either go on Yellow Jacket or the villain. And they're going to give him +2/+2 for 3 turns. This is a pretty mean card. So that definitely is going to make the encounter deck a little bit harder. And then Yellow Jacket's plan, discard cards from the encounter deck until a card from the Ant-Man Nemesis set is discarded this way and reveal it. So this could pretty much put the whole encounter deck in the discard pile, because there's only going to be, you know, a couple other cards in there, assuming these are still in the discard pile from when you cleared them when they first came out. This could almost just say, put an acceleration token on the main scheme. So that card's pretty rough. But overall, I don't think this is too bad. I think it's pretty easy to deal with. Is it a shrug? Nah, I'm gonna say it's a light Sigh. Like he's got a little bit of heft to him, and this, if you're not able to remove it right away for some reason, could cause you some problems. So I'm gonna say that one, that's on the lighter. That's probably the easiest Sigh. Let's say it that way. Then we come up to the Beetle, and for me, this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, is whether or not you see these, you know, Shadows is just such a random thing. It either comes up in the game or it doesn't. And I've played a ton of Wasp. She is one of my most played heroes. And I feel like I've hardly ever fought against the Beetle, just once in a great while. So it is incredibly random how often you see these Nemesis encounter sets. But he can be a pain. He's only a 1/1, which is nice, but he has guards, so you have to waste 4 damage on him, which is not hard for Wasp. You know, she's got the stings and she's got the pinpoint strikes, so she can easily blow that up. But when you do, you have to spend a punch resource. Otherwise, he gets shuffled back into the deck to come out and deal with it again. So it can be a bit of a problem. And then you get this Mother's Orders. It's going to cause you to spend a resource every time you want to make a basic attack. That's annoying, but, you know, again, it's only 2 threats, so it's pretty easy to get rid of. So really, all these things are doing are just causing you to redirect your resources elsewhere as opposed to the villain, which, you know, it's going to slow you down a little bit, but it's not going to cause you too much trouble. And then I do really like this Beetle armor. Either attach it to Beetle, but if you don't, it goes on the villain when it comes out, and it gives the character +4 hit points. And you'll notice there's something missing from this card. There's no way to get rid of this. So this is going to come out, and it's going to give the villain 4 health. And if they're still on the first stage of the game, when you defeat him and move on to the next stage, they're still going to have this. They're going to get 4 extra hit points. So if this comes out early, they're actually going to end up getting 8 extra hit points out of this. That's a pretty significant chunk. That's over half of a stage usually. And then you get these 2 Beetlemanias. They just surge and alter ego, which is kind of boring. And then it's going to cause Beetle to attack you. And if he's not out, then it just surges. So this card basically just says surge. So this card does nothing. This card adds 8 health to the villain, which isn't great. And then this is, you know what? I'm really tempted to just say this is a shrug. It's really not that big of a deal. Yeah, we're going to say it's a shrug. She's got like 6 attack events in her deck. She's going to have no problem blowing him up. And then, yeah, he might go back into the encounter deck, but he's a pretty wimpy encounter card, so you actually wouldn't mind seeing him once in a while. And that's easy to deal with too, yeah. Wasp, Beetle, no problem. I feel like every time I put one in the shrug pile, out comes a scoop, because Avalanche is terrifyingly horrible for Quicksilver. He's got 4 health, 1 scheme, 2 attack, but he has insight 2. So when he comes out, he's immediately going to put 2 threat on the main scheme, which is a pretty significant chunk in solo. And he's either going to deal 2 indirect damage to you or cause you to exhaust, which for Quicksilver is a real problem because he can't stand up unless he does his basic activation. So if you don't have an always be running in your hand, you're going to be exhausted and you can't do all the cool things you wanted to do on your turn, or you're going to take 2 damage. Quicksilver only has 9 health. So that's not good. Insight 2, terrible. But when the side scheme comes out, it's another insight. So actually, when you do shadows, that's 3 extra threat on the main scheme. This could easily cause you to lose the scheme. You know, it's already gotten some extra threat from step 1 of the villain phase. And then God forbid if you're an alter ego and the villain schemed, and then here's 3 more free threat, and there's a crisis. So you just added 3 threat, and you've got get rid of this thing for 2 more threat. Horrible, horrible. And then these earthquakes are in the deck now. They have an insight. They're going to add more threat and cause you to either discard cards from your hand or exhaust. And then the vibration resistance that either goes on Avalanche or the villain, and it basically gives them armor, makes them harder to kill, and you have to exhaust to get rid of it. This one's not too bad. Again, with Quicksilver, if you exhaust to get rid of this, you can't just free ready because you didn't do a basic activation. So yeah, I think this is a scoop. I think if you see this, not only could it cause you to lose the game immediately with all this threat increase, but having these cards in the deck is just going to be continually adding threat randomly to the encounter deck that you're not prepared for. So I think this is a really, really tough one. The minion himself isn't that hard to deal with, especially if Quicksilver has one of his attack upgrade out. He easily can knock him out, but he's added so much threat, probably did some damage to you. So I think it's going to be hard to recover. So that is a scoop. One thing that's really cool about Avalanche that I somehow completely forgot was a thing, he's a member of the Brotherhood of Mutants, which, you know, pretty early in the game. Now, Quicksilver came with a couple cards that were X-Factor traded, so we did get excited about seeing mutant stuff way back then, but I totally forgot Avalanche was a member of the Brotherhood, so we really had some X-Men flavor from pretty early on. So now we have another example of one of the strongest heroes in the game. Does the Nemesis set match up? One thing that's interesting about this one is there's only 4 cards because Wanda had 2 obligations, but they aren't any more interesting than anybody else's, so I'm not going to bother to talk about it other than the fact that she has 2 of them. So Luminous comes out. She's got 5 health, so it's automatically extra annoying. And if she does get to activate against you, you're going to discard the top card of the encounter deck, and she might deal you an extra encounter card if there's enough boost icons. So if you aren't able to kill her right away, she actually is a pretty good problem. And then there's this side scheme. It only has 2 threats, so not hard for Wanda to remove. And it increases the number of boost icons on each encounter card by 1. The thing that makes this side scheme so interesting is you might be tempted to leave this in play because this is going to boost your molecular decays and this is going to boost your hex bolts. It's going to help you get those higher boost icons for your effects. So you're very tempted to leave this in play, but if you do and Luminous activates you, she's more likely to trigger against you, give you an extra encounter card. You have this magical suspension that if it comes out, it gets attached to you and it makes all your cards cost 1 extra. You definitely need to get rid of this and it's going to cause you to exhaust. So not that big of a deal, but you're definitely going to want to get rid of it. You're not going to be paying 1 extra for your cards. And then this Chaos Manipulation actually summons Luminous into play, and it might cause her to activate against you, which might cause you to get an extra encounter card. So overall, I think this Nemesis set really was trying to match up with Scarlet Witch's power level. It interacts with her theme very well of how it messes with the boost icons. And I like the decision of whether or not you remove this because you might be tempted to just leave it into play. So I don't think it's overly difficult. It's not going to be a scoop by any means, but I think this is one of the better designed ones. I really, really like how it interacts with the hero and it gives you some extra choices, but it is definitely a sigh. Like it's not a shrug. It's not nothing. It's going to make the game a little bit harder for sure. And then we come to another one of those absolutely horrible Nemesis encounter sets, which tells me this must be surely one of the most powerful heroes, right? Well, it's Groot, so not necessarily. This encounter set, similar to Hulk's, is just horrendously awful. You get Fernax here with 6 health, and after he activates, he's going to deal 2 indirect damage to each player. So again, in multiplayer, this is just so bad. He's going to hit Groot for 2, so he's going to be eating up your growth counters. And then if you're playing multiplayer, he's going to be hitting everybody else too. And he has 6 health, super hard to deal with. You get this Burning Inferno, 3 threat per player. Again, multiplayer, nobody's allowed to play Groot just in case this comes out, because this could have 12 threat on it. And it's just going to deal 2 indirect damage to each player when the villain phase begins. Why is this so bad? And then it's going to add 3 Fan the Flames to the encounter deck, take 2 indirect damage. If this is the side team is in play, take another one. If Fernax is in play, take another one. This is definitely a scoop. This is one of the hardest encounter sets. And again, for one of the weaker heroes, like Groot is not remotely equipped to deal with this. This thing is going to just make sure you never, ever have growth counters for the rest of the game. So if you're playing Groot and you see this first, second, third, fourth, ninth turn, start over. I feel like every time we have a scoop or a shrug, the next one is in the opposite direction, because looking at Rockets here, this guy is pretty much a joke. Like, he has 3 health, 1 scheme, 1 attack. He's got quick strike, so that's bad. Rocket doesn't have a lot of health, so he's going to take 1, and villainous, so he could actually take a chunk. So the minion isn't great, but he's super easy to deal with. And then his side scheme, all it is an amplify with a small amount of threat, no problem to deal with whatsoever. And the thing that kind of makes me laugh are it adds 2 planetary invasions that are going to discard cards from the top of the encounter deck until you discard a minion and put it into play. Now, it does give it a tough status, which is a problem, but Rocket is actually kind of happy to see this. Like, he wants minions to come into play. So this is basically 2 guaranteed minions that Rocket's going to be able to murder to draw cards from. So I think he's happy to see these cards. And then the bazooka is not great either. It either gives +2 to blackjack or the villain. It does take 3 mental to get rid of, which is quite a bit for one of these. But, you know, with Rocket salvage, that's going to be 2 of the mental right there. So it shouldn't be too much trouble for Rocket to salvage this into something more interesting for himself. So we're going to call this a Shrug. I don't think this is bad. In fact, I think it actually kind of helps Rocket. It's not great. This could be a chunk of damage that Rocket is not prepared to handle. But once you deal with this, it doesn't make the rest of the game any harder and might actually make it a little bit easier. So I think for as impossibly difficult as Groot's was, Rocket's is super easy. And that's maybe kind of my review of Galaxy's Most Wanted as a whole. Like, the difficulty is really all over the place. And that's represented even in the Nemesis sets. Next, we'll take a look at Star-Lord's, and this one is super, super interesting. So you get this 6 health minion, Mr. Knife, who, you know, 6 is a lot. 2/2, he has Retaliate, so he's kind of a pain to deal with. And then he says the first treachery the engaged player reveals each villain phase gains Surge. So you absolutely have to kill this guy, because you're already having extra encounter cards because you're playing Star-Lord. And then if he's still in play on the next villain phase, and you get a treachery, and you're probably flipping 2 or 3 encounter cards, so one of them is going to be a treachery, and it's going to surge just 1 more encounter card. That is not good. So you have to kill him quickly, but it's not easy. You know, if you have an element gun, that's 3 of the health, but then Star-Lord can only punch it for 2, and you're going to be taking Retaliate the whole time, so he is a problem to deal with. Now, if you have Sliding Shot, you can take him out pretty easily. So one way or another, this guy's giving you an extra encounter card. And then speaking of extra encounter cards, you get a 2 threat hazard side scheme with hinder 2. So this is going to be 4 threat. So this is really just going to be eating up a lot of your resources. Between these 2, like, you're probably not going to be able to get rid of both on the first turn. So one way or another, this is causing you some extra encounter cards just for coming out. And then they add these 3 Spartoy Cunnings to the encounter deck, which is one of the most annoying cards in the whole game. It just comes out, discards a card at random from your hand, deals you a damage, and places a threat on the main scheme. Like, just does a little bit of everything. And anytime you see random discard, I think, you know, it's hard to measure the difficulty of that, because it might not hurt you that bad, or it might completely blow up your turn. So I think this is on the lighter side of Scoop. Like, he causes you to spend so many resources to get rid of these, or you're going to get extra encounter cards, and you're already probably giving yourself extra encounter cards. And so, you know, you're trying to keep up with all the stuff you're doing, and then you have to probably spend an entire turn getting rid of these, and then the rest of the game is, I'm going to call this a Scoop. If you see that early in the game as Star-Lord, you don't really want to put up with that for the rest of the game, so it might be worth just starting over. Next up is Gamora, and hers is really, really cool, and because, of course, we have that wonderful relationship between her and Nebula. It's so fascinating, so interesting, and Nebula is one of my favorite characters in this game and kind of in the MCU. I just think she's really, really well represented and really interesting. She's got 5 health, so that's not good. 2 attack, 1 scheme, Retaliate 2. You don't see very much Retaliate 2 in the game. So if you don't knock her out, you know, in one chunk, she's definitely going to get you. And then she's going to discard your Nebula ally from play. Now, if you're playing Gamora, and you played your Nebula ally, and then she comes out and just makes her go away, that's just a huge waste of your resources, so that really stinks. And then the side scheme, only Gamora can get rid of it. It's going to have 4 threat, and it's basically going to give you an extra encounter card. So it's a hazard just for Gamora. Now, she shouldn't have too much trouble removing this. It's 4 threat, but, you know, you're also dealing with this Retaliate 2 minion in your face, so this definitely is going to cause you some trouble. It's not a Scoop, but it is not a Shrug. Like, this is going to give you a lot to handle, and then it's going to add to the deck these 2 Waylays, which this picture is just heartbreaking, I think. It's going to stun and confuse Gamora, so this is a really nasty card. This makes the encounter deck much harder. And then you get this in a bind that's going to blank your text box, so you're not going to get your free damage and your free threat every turn. And you have to discard an attack event and take a damage to get rid of it. I think this is a very well designed one. This feels appropriately difficult to the power level of the hero. It's definitely going to cause you some trouble, but it's not going to ruin your game. I don't think it's going to end it for you. But if Nebula comes out and it did take away your Nebula ally, and you have to deal with all this. It's a lot to handle, so it is definitely on the higher side of Sigh. Like, this is a harder, I think this is a harder one, but not quite too hard. Very, very good one there. All right, we're about halfway through. Next up is Drax, my most played hero, and I feel like I have seen this guy quite a few times. And frankly, I don't think this one is too bad. You get a 5 health minion with 3 attack. He has guard and retaliate 1, so you have to knock him out. But the thing about Drax is even very early in the game, he can have 5 attack pretty easily. So most of the time, you just knock this guy out in one hit, and you don't even have to suffer the retaliate, especially if you have a knife leap, you can just cut right through him. But even without that, you just knock him down with one hit. And then this Call the Weak side scheme can be a real problem, giving every enemy +2 attack. I love how this interacts with Drax because he wants to be attacked by the villain, but this makes it a lot less appealing. It's only 2 threat, which is really, really good because Drax has a hard time dealing with that. So maybe if you have Manus out, you can get rid of it right away. Otherwise, this could sit out there for a minute and cause you problems. But then it adds these 2 I Will Destroy Yous to the encounter deck. It just surges an Alter Ego, which is fine because Drax doesn't want to go to Alter Ego anyway. And then it's going to make Yotat attack you if he happens to be in play, but he's probably not going to be in play. So it's going to have the villain attack you, and Drax is fine with that. Drax is happy when the villain attacks him. So I think this is similar to Rockets. Like, you're glad these are in the deck. You're happy to have the extra activations. And then this challenge accepted can be a real problem. It's going to give +2 attack to probably the villain, and Drax has to hit that enemy for 4 more to get rid of it. But again, that's not really a problem. So most likely this is going to come out attached to the villain, and then Drax is just going to knock it right off. But it does have surge, so it's not nothing. I'm actually going to say this is a heavy shrug. Like, it's not nothing. And if Drax got a really slow start, this is going to slow him down even more and could cause him to lose the game. And Drax is already kind of walking a thin line most of the time anyway. But I haven't had, my experience, I haven't had too much trouble with this set. So we're actually going to say that's a shrug. It's okay. You're not too upset. After Drax was Venom, and I want to show his obligation just because this is one of the more interesting ones. It's similar to Hulk that you can't get rid of it. Again, appropriate to the character. He's always dealing with this problem. And it's either going to cause you to exhaust your Alter Ego and take 2 damage. So it's not enough to just exhaust. You also have to take 2 damage. Or it's going to cause you to bring in one of your symbiotes. So either way, when you see your obligation, this is one of those that it's not going to be nothing. Usually your obligation is a nothing card, and sometimes you're happy to see him because you can flip down to Alter Ego for free, use your cool supports, and then flip back into hero form, exhausted. But this one actually is a pain to see because he actually is going to do something pretty negative to you. And then instead of your standard giant minion and some treacheries, you just get these 4 enraged symbiotes with 2 attack, 1 scheme, guard, and patrol, so you absolutely have to deal with these guys. And then also the side scheme only has 2 threat, but it's a hazard and you can't take threat off this until these are gone, similar to the Abominations. So if this comes out early in the game, this is a scoop if I've ever seen one. You know, Venom could attack and kill one of these. And if you were very fortunate to get the multi-gun out on the first turn, maybe you can kill a couple of them. And if you have the multi-gun and a running gun, you can take them all out. So it's possible. But if you don't, that's a lot of attack that's coming at you from very early in the game that's going to be very difficult to deal with. Later in the game, this is nothing. You can wipe these guys out, no problem. Actually, I think this makes the game more fun when these come out because you just multi-gun these things to death in rapid fire fashion, and it's really, really fun to do. But if you see this early in the game, I think it's a scoop because you're going to be getting an extra encounter card. You're probably not going to be able to kill them all, and you're going to take a big chunk of damage on that next villain phase, depending on how many of them are still in play. So we're going to call that one a scoop, but that one's very, very easy to deal with later in the game. Moving into the Mad Titan Shadow, we'll be talking about Adam Warlock's Nemesis, the Magus, and we're going to be talking about one much, much later that I wish they had done something similar with this guy as they did with the Dark Phoenix, because he is actually one of the most powerful, terrifying villains in the Marvel Universe. He's basically the future evil version of Adam Warlock, and he is horrendously evil and powerful. And so I almost feel like he deserved the Dark Phoenix treatment. They just hadn't thought of it yet, probably. But he's got 5 health, 2 attack, 2 scheme, quick strike, and toughness. So he's got a little bit more going on than the average Nemesis. And that's good, because like I said, he's really, really strong. And when he activates against you, discard the top 5 cards of your deck, which if you're Adam Warlock, you're probably already discarding cards from your deck. Sometimes you don't mind because you have Soul World and you've got those cards that let you get cards back out of the discard pile. So I like how this one interacts with the hero in that it could cause you to run out of your deck, get you an extra encounter card, but it might actually help you in some ways. And then you get this Universal Church of Truth that is going to stun you when you run out of cards, which again interacts well with the kit. It's doing what this is doing and also what you're doing. It's only acceleration with 2 threats, so it's really not that bad. You're going to remove it right away. So this forced response is not going to happen very often. And I want to reiterate, I'm talking about this from a solo perspective. I know that if you're playing multiplayer, a longer game, Shadows comes out early, these cards get shuffled into the deck, and then these do keep popping up over and over the course of the game. And I think that's really where they're meant to do their damage, is, this keeps coming out. If it comes out at the wrong time, this probably will stun somebody. So I know that some of these can be worse in multiplayer. So I just wanted to kind of point that back out. And then we get the Cosmic Inquisition that gets added, Insight 2. That's scary. Anytime the encounter deck can randomly add 2 threat to the main scheme, that is not good. And if the side scheme does happen to be in play, it's going to cause you to lose 10 cards from your deck. There's a good chance that is going to deck you and get you an extra encounter card. Otherwise, you have to actually go and find this, and then you got to remove it again. So that one could be bad, especially with Insight 2 is the worst part of that card, though. And then you get these little Zealots of Truth, 4 health, 2 attack, so they're not nothing. And as long as these are in play, you can't remove threat from this. So I really like how this whole thing works together. It works well with Adam Warlock, and it works well with itself. I don't think it's overly difficult. We're going to call that a Sigh. It's not a Shrug by any means. Like, that's going to cause you to deal with it. It does make the encounter deck a little bit harder over the course of the game. I think that's similar to what I said about Gamora. I think that's one of the particularly well-designed ones. It's an appropriate difficulty level, has a lot of synergy internally and with the hero. So yeah, big fan of that one. The other one in the Mad Titan Shadow was Spectrum. I feel like I keep saying the opposite of one thing to the next, because I don't think this one interacts with Spectrum in any particularly interesting way at all, which isn't the end of the world. I don't want to be too hard on it. The designers have said at times they've had a real hard time figuring out who would be a good Nemesis, because some heroes just don't really have a Nemesis. Spectrum isn't really a headlining character in the comics, so she doesn't really have a main villain. So it's totally fine, but it is worth pointing out. So you get Radioactive Man. It's got 6 health. That's not good. 1 scheme, 1 attack. When he activates against you, he deals a damage to each character you control, and that's kind of the whole theme here. It's just a lot of extra damage. So again, doesn't really have anything to do with Spectrum, but it is universally annoying. It's going to really eat up your allies. So he's pretty difficult to deal with if you don't have Spectrum's big attack card. Now she can have 3 attacks, so it's only going to take a couple punches, but he's definitely going to eat up a lot of your time. And then the side scheme is a 2-threat Crisis. Crisis is always bad to see. It's not hard to get rid of, but you absolutely have to get rid of it, so it's not even a choice. And then when you do get rid of it, it's going to deal another damage to every friendly character in play. So him coming out is definitely going to cause you some extra damage. And then we get these 2 sap powers that attach to your identity. And after your turn ends, take 1 damage. You have to spend 2 lightning to get rid of it. Again, none of these are that hard to deal with, but they're all probably going to hit you at least once before you get rid of them. And so that's just a lot of extra damage you're going to be taking. And then the Radioactive Blast, if you are an alter ego, which similar to Hawkeye, Spectrum really doesn't have any good reason to go to alter ego if she can help it. So the placing 2 threat on the main scheme hopefully will never trigger. And then it's just going to deal 2 damage into hero form. So this one is incredibly focused in its theme of dealing extra damage to you. I don't think it's too hard though. That one feels sort of in the middle to me. I don't know if I've ever encountered Radioactive Man. I haven't played Spectrum a ton, but I think once you if you're able to deal with him quickly, then it's not going to be too much trouble for you. But he is going to leave you with a low health, so you're probably going to need to heal up soon. Similar to Gamora, we have Nebula's Nemesis. That is exceptionally well designed. They definitely put a lot of love into Gamora and Nebula, in my opinion. I suspect somebody over there is a big fan of those characters, as am I. So she's a 6 health minion, 2 attack, 2 scheme. And similar to how the other one worked, she's going to discard your Gamora ally, which is worse because Gamora costs 3. And this actually happened to me the other day, and it really, really stunk that I just paid 3 resources for Gamora, and then out comes this one to get rid of that for me. And then if she does manage to attack and damage you, which with 6 health, she really might, Nebula might have a Weapon Master when this comes out, so she can immediately hit her for 4 and then punch her for 2, so she can deal with Gamora pretty easily. So again, the worst thing she can do is discard your Gamora ally, which there's a good chance you're trying to keep your Gamora ally in play because of the Daughters of Thanos team-up cards, which is what happened to me. So that is not nothing. But if she does damage you, you discard an upgrade, so you're going to lose one of your techniques probably. That's not good. You don't want that. But the rest of this is so cool about how it works, because if the other hero happens to be playing Gamora, then you're actually going to get a whole bunch of bonuses. Now, the self-preservation side scheme has 2 threats, so it's not hard to deal with. It does reduce your stats by 1, which does make it a little bit harder to deal with. You can't just word it for 2 anymore. And he gives Gamora +1 attack, and her attacks gain piercing. So if the minion is in play, she's actually hitting you for 3 with piercing, and Nebula can get tough, so that's a cool interaction there. But if this character is not in play, and either you have your Gamora ally in play or another hero is playing Gamora, they get these bonuses. So that is a really, really fun interaction. And then you get same thing. You get the +1 weapon that could go on Gamora if she's in play, And if this one isn't, then this could go on your ally or the other hero. Otherwise, it's going to go on the villain. And you have to discard an upgrade to get rid of it, but it's only +1 attack, so you probably won't waste your time. But there's a good chance you'll be happy to see that. And then this is one of the most fun encounter cards. Gamora attacks you. If no attack was made this way, this card gains Surge. So again, it's going to cause either this minion to attack you, or if you have your Gamora ally, they're going to turn and smack you, or if the other hero is Gamora, they have to resolve their attack against you. Absolutely hilarious. And so I think this Nemesis set might be the best argument for why you should play a Nebula Gamora team up. The potential for shenanigans is just so fantastic. Now, as far as the difficulty of this one, you know, I said a lot about if the other person, but there's a good chance nobody else is playing Gamora and you don't have your ally in play, which case, you know, these do make the game a little bit harder. These probably are just going to surge, and these aren't too bad. So we're going to say that it's not a Shrug because Gamora is pretty beefy, but it's actually not too bad. Like I said, the worst thing is if it removed your Gamora ally. That's really unfortunate. Next, we come to the Living Laser, War Machine's Nemesis minion, and I think this is who they were talking about when I just mentioned how the designers said they had a hard time finding good Nemesises for some heroes. I believe it was referring to the Living Laser for War Machine. He doesn't really have a big bad. So he attacks for 2 with Quick Strike, always bad. And he has Piercing. Again, this interacts with the hero nicely because War Machine can get tough, so he's definitely going to hit you. And then you get this Deadly Light Show, a 3/4 threat Crisis, and when you defeat it, deal 1 damage to each identity, which could ping a tough. This, similar to what I said about Thor, similar to what I said about She-Hulk, and Solo, this is a real problem. War Machine is not great at thwarting. Now, he does have the one card that I believe it removes 3 threat or 4. Honestly, War Machine's one of my least favorite characters. I haven't played him very much. So I know he has a threat removal card. Maybe it can take this out, or it'll at least be close, but this is such a priority for War Machine. He's already probably having trouble managing the threat, so that is a real problem for him. And then you get these laser strikes. They're so mean. Put 3 of them in the deck, discard an upgrade you control, and if you cannot, this card gains Surge. If this comes out early in the game, and again, that's mostly what we're talking about here, this is going to make the rest of your game as War Machine so much harder. It's going to be so hard to set up if these things keep popping out every time you pay a decent amount of resources for the upgraded chassis, for the shoulder cannon, or your gauntlet gun. This is just going to keep eating them alive, and it might even do it on the boost effect. So, you know, I know Iron Man had similar cards, and I think I put him in the Sigh category. I don't think I made that a scoop, but I think for War Machine I am. I think he has enough trouble managing the threat that this is really going to be a potential disaster. And then these are just going to haunt you for the rest of the game. I think you would just rather start over than have to put up with that over the course of the game. We come to one of everybody's favorite Nemesis sets because we get to see Ultron again, one of the best villains in the game with the Visions Nemesis set. This one is so cool. He's got a 6 health with toughness, so, you know, he feels appropriately beefy. Maybe he should have been even a little bit bigger because he's one of the big bads in the Marvel Universe and one of the big bads in this game. So almost feels like he should have had 8 health, but that's a quibble. And when he attacks you, if the Ultron drones is in play, which yes, you actually get the exact same card as you get from the villain, which is so cool, that can start putting drones in play. When he attacks you, he puts a drone in play, so he acts exactly like his villain version. I love the consistency when they do this, just how the Nebula hero works exactly like the Nebula villain. I love that consistency. And so when he comes out, if you don't kill him right away, which 6 health with toughness, there's a decent chance you're not going to be able to kill him right away. You're probably going to start getting some drones. And then you get the side scheme. It's got 3 health, 3 threat with acceleration. And this is what causes you to put the Ultron drones environment into play. And then you're going to immediately get a drone. So you're getting a 6 health minion with toughness. You're getting a 3 threat acceleration and a drone. And so then this is going to be in play for probably the rest of the game. The only thing I could think of that would cause this to be removed is if you're playing Absorbing Man, it says that his environments cause every other environment to be discarded when they come into play. So I think that's the only way to get rid of Ultron drones. If there's another way, let me know in the comments. I couldn't come up with anything. And the reason that matters is these 2 Relentless Androids get shuffled into the deck are pretty bad. If Ultron drones is in play, put the top 2 cards of your deck into play face down as drones. That's not that bad. You get 2 1/1 minions. You know, you've played a lot of Ultron. You know, drones aren't too bad as long as you can deal with them reasonably well. But if Ultron drones happens to have left play, and again, I think there's only the one way, this causes you to discard 2 random cards from your hand. So weirdly, Absorbing Man is Vision's real nemesis, because if this comes out during that and then you hit these cards, that is absolutely going to destroy your hand, discarding 2 cards at random. So against Absorbing Man, this might be a scoop. I'm kidding, but I think this is a really good one. Vision's pretty strong. and this feels appropriately strong to the character. I don't think it's overly difficult, especially because the drones just really aren't that difficult to deal with. Plus, it's so cool. You're actually probably kind of happy to see this once in a while. It's not a Shrug by any means. We're going to call that a Sigh. It's gonna give you some things to deal with, but I don't think you'll be too unhappy to see it. Very, very well designed one. And then there was Valkyrie. I don't know what it is about the heroes in the game that already have so many challenges to overcome, like Hulk and Groot, why they have to give them the absolute worst Nemesis sets that completely wreck the character. This is the worst one, in my opinion, when paired with the hero, and it's not even close. Valkyrie already has a lot of trouble. She plays pretty clunkily, and she is so narrowly focused that she's really, really hard to play in solo anyway. And then if this comes out, you're done. This is the scoop of scoops. This could end the game for you the turn before you're about to win. It doesn't matter when this comes out. You get this 5 health minion with 2 scheme, 1 attack. Doesn't sound that bad, but when revealed, you search the encounter deck discard pile and set aside area for a copy of Seduced and attach to your identity. So not only are you getting the minion, the side scheme, which we'll talk about in a second, but you're also getting one of these Seduced cards. So her Shadows actually brings out 3 cards. Not great. And then, so what Seduce says is you can't attack. You can't make basic attacks. You can't play attack events. And it's really hard to win the game when you can't attack. You have to go to Alter Ego, spend a couple resources to get rid of it. It's really, really hard for Valkyrie to go to Alter Ego because she's terrible at managing threat. And, oh, by the way, this 3-threat acceleration side scheme comes out and says players cannot discard attachments that are attached to friendly characters. So, you have to clear this before you can even go to Alter Ego to get rid of Seduced. And how is Valkyrie supposed to get rid of this when she can't attack because she needs to attack in order to trigger her threat removal card, and she can only thwart for 1? So what's she supposed to do when this comes out? This is going to take like 5 turns to deal with because this is going to be really hard to remove depending on what else is in your deck. And then, oh, you finally do get rid of this. So you quickly run to Alter Ego so you can get rid of this because you can't kill her until you get rid of this because you can't attack. And then she's going to scheme for 2 on top of all of that. If I'm talking a lot about this, is because this one's a real thing with me. I've got a lot to say about Valkyrie, and this is one of the, I can't understand why is this so hard? This completely ends your game. I mean, the other scoops, I'm kind of joking, but with Valkyrie, just start over. Just don't even bother, because this is gonna, by the time even if you manage to deal with this and get rid of all these cards, the game is going to be over. And then there is also this Beguiled card that who cares? The rest of it's so bad. It's going to steal one of your allies, which, also great because you're probably going to need the help of allies. You're definitely going to need the help of allies to deal with all this stuff. And then this is going to come out and steal your best one. So, even if Valkyrie was a really strong hero, this would be a problem. But the fact that she already has so much trouble playing in solo, and maybe that's the thing. Maybe you're supposed to be playing Valkyrie in multiplayer and everybody else can help you deal with this. Then it's probably not that bad. But these do make the rest of the encounter deck worse. Like, these are just annoying cards in general for everybody to have to put up with. But for Valkyrie in solo, I don't think there will be a bigger scoop. Now it's time to talk about Sinister Motives, and we're going to look at Miles Morales. So we get the Prowler is his Nemesis. It has 5 health with Stalwart and 2 attack. So he's not nothing. And, Miles has all the status effects, but they're not going to work on him. And if you happen to be an Alter Ego, which I think this one really interacts with Miles' character really well, if you happen to be an Alter Ego, when this set comes out, the cards are a little bit worse. 5 health is an annoying number for Miles. He can attack for 2, so it's going to take a few punches. And even his attack card only does 4 damage, so you'd basically have to hit him with your web shot and waste the Venom Blast on him to finish him off. So he definitely causes Miles a little bit of trouble. Now Miles is super strong, so it doesn't cause him that much trouble. But still, it's going to eat up some of your resources. We get the Tracking Prey side schemes, 4 threat, acceleration, and if you're an Alter Ego, it gets an extra acceleration token. So it could be moving the threat up by 2. So this is going to eat up a lot of your resources to deal with. Similar to Star-Lord's, like this is putting a lot of stats on the board that you've got to deal with. So this is actually a pretty decent problem. Then you get the Razor Claws that either going to go on a big minion, and this won't go on the villain, so that actually really reduces the difficulty of this one. Most of the time, this is probably just going to surge. But if it does go on a minion, it's not great. And it gives him piercing, which Miles gets tough, so that's a cool interaction there. And then it's going to put the Slice and Dice in the encounter deck. That's going to cause the Prowler to attack the player with the fewest remaining hit points. And if it defeats a character, so if this kills an ally, it's going to surge. Or if no attack was made, it's just going to surge. So I think this is a really, really good set. It feels appropriate to the character. It's pretty decently a problem. Miles can handle it. This isn't a scoop, but it's not a Shrug either. Like this is going to eat up most of your turn. It might even be a couple turns before you're able to deal with all of this. So yeah, that's a pretty tough Sigh. You're not happy to see that if you're playing Miles. So far we're over halfway through and we've seen a good amount of what I think are appropriate difficulty, a surprisingly large number of overly difficult ones in my opinion, and not too many that are too easy, but they're not that far. I know it's hard to tell on the camera here, but they're not that far how they're spread out here. Now we get to Ghost Spider, and this one definitely has an obligation worth talking about because this is one of the cards I really wish this card didn't exist. It causes you to search your deck, hand, discard pile, and play area for George Stacy and set him aside. So basically this is either going to remove George Stacy from your hand, your deck, or your play area. And this card, for me personally, really makes Ghost Spider less fun to play. This is one of the main reasons why I'm just not as big of a fan of Ghost Spider as a lot of other people are. I think she's amazingly fun to play. But George Stacy is a big part of the reason why she's so good. He enables so many of her abilities to work better because her economy is pretty bad. You know, her cards are expensive, but if you can store your cards on George, then it's not too bad. You've got access to them outside of your hand, so it's like you have a bigger hand size. But because of this card in the counter deck, it causes you to think twice about even playing George. And if you do play George and you've had fun stacking cards on him, and then this comes out, it just takes him away and it really wrecks your game. So, you know, Ghost Spider is pretty strong, so maybe this was just meant to balance out the strength, but for me, it makes me almost not even want to play her just because it's so annoying that this is in there. I know I end up getting so negative about Ghost Spider, but I just wish this wasn't in the deck because I think she's so much less fun to play knowing that you might be losing George at any moment. Now, if you see this early, you know, gets discarded as a boost or whatever, then, you know, go nuts and have a great time. But otherwise, I don't like that card. And now her Nemesis set isn't too bad. You get the Lizard, he's 5 health and 3 attack, but she can easily blow him up with a Ghost Kick. And if you don't, you know, kill him right away, he's going to do some healing, but I don't think he's too bad at all. You get this Side Scheme. It's got 5 threat, which seems like a lot, but I guess they did that because she has the Phantom Flips that she can easily remove it. And then it's going to heal 1 damage from each enemy, so until you get rid of it, it's going to be kind of annoying, but it's not doing anything else. Like, you actually don't need to get rid of this. It doesn't have an acceleration or a crisis or a hazard or anything like that. It's going to do a little bit of healing. Really not. You might not even waste a Phantom Flip on that. Then you get 2 copies of this In Cold Blood that go into the encounter deck. It's going to cause the Lizard to attack you. And then weirdly, it says you cannot play events until after that attack resolves. So I guess you can't play defense events. So it's an interesting little caveat there that you don't really see on other cards. And then if it doesn't cause any attacks to be made, it just surges. And then you get the Experimental Injection attachment that's going to go on a minion and gives that minion plus 4 hit points. So most often this is probably just going to surge, not a big deal. So I think her encounter set it's almost a Shrug. Like, it's really not much. If the Lizard wasn't attacking for 3, this might be a Shrug. I'll call it a Sigh. I think it's a light Sigh. I don't think you really care that much when this comes out. I want to call the whole thing, this is a scoop though. We're putting that over there. I hate that card so much. That comes out and steals your George, or just the whole time that this is in the encounter deck, it's making the potential for your game less fun. So that's how we're going to handle that one. Next up comes Nova, and I think this one is a lot less scary than it looks like it's going to be. It's got 5 health with 3 attack, Warbringer here, which is kind of a lot. You know, Nova doesn't have a big attack card, so 5's kind of a lot to deal with. And it says when he attacks you, he gets +1 attack for each card with a printed wild resource in your hand. And Nova does like playing with wild resources, but he's probably not going to have that many. It's not easy to add that many wild resources to your deck. So he might get +1 attack here and there, 2 if he's very lucky, but most of the time he's just going to be hitting you for 3 if you don't kill him right away. And then the Side Scheme comes with 2 threat, and it says each player discards a card they control with a printed wild resource, and for each card discarded this way, you're going to place a threat here. Now, this is one of those swinging for the fences cards because there aren't very many cards in the game that have a printed wild resource. Most of the time, they're going to be signature allies or something like the Symbiote Suit. So if this does hit something, it's going to be something you hate to lose. And so adding a threat here is almost negligible compared to the fact that people just lost some of their best cards probably, but there aren't that many. And then you should be able to get rid of it pretty quickly, so because it's only 2 threat with a hazard, so you definitely want to get rid of it. As the win revealed is potentially disastrous or is going to do nothing. And then you get this, the war's been brought, gets shuffled in, it's going to surge, which is always bad. And then discard X cards from the top of the encounter deck where X is equal to total number of printed wild resources on cards in your hand. Again, cards in your control and cards in your discard pile. Believe it or not, Nova actually doesn't have a single card in his kit that has a wild resource printed on it. Even the helmet is a mental. And Ms. Marvel doesn't have one either, which often the signature allies do. So you're not going to have that many wild resources. So this seems like that's what I was saying. It seems like it should be scary, but it's really not. In this War Delivery, you may spend a wild resources. If you do not, the villain and Warbringer each attack you. So basically, exhaust the helmet is all that this does. I'm actually going to call this a Shrug. Like, Warbringer, kind of a beefy minion, but you blow them up and go about your day. I don't think it makes the encounter deck that much harder. Most of these cards are pretty weak, actually. So I'm going to call that a Shrug. I don't think Nova's going to have too much trouble with that at all. Next up is Ironheart. I want to talk about our obligation because I really, really like the design of this one. For all the bad I had to say about Ghost Spiders, I think this one's really cool. It's going to remove 1 progress counter from your identity, which is unfortunate because, you're trying so hard to get those progress counters. It's the fun of playing Ironheart. But if you happen to not have any, then this is going to give you an extra encounter card, basically Surge, and then this goes back into the encounter deck. So this is going to just keep coming over and over and over. It's going to constantly be stealing your progress counters. It's a minor setback. Just the name says it all. Very, very well designed. I like this obligation a lot. It's far more interesting than the average one. Now, her Nemesis set in general isn't too bad, in my opinion. You get this minion, 4 health. She only hits you for 1. Now, she schemes for 2. They know that the heroes that like to play an alter ego, they usually give the Nemesis set a little bit higher scheme, which is very, very smart design. Now, if she has tough, she gets higher stats, and she gets a tough at the end of every villain phase. So she's pretty much going to come out with tough. And then if you don't kill her, she's going to get another tough every turn. So she can be kind of a pain to deal with, but she's only got 4 health. That Ironheart can handle this pretty well. And then she has her side schemes, got 4 threat. And if she is in play, this is a hazard. And if she's not in play, this is acceleration. But since you're probably going to kill her almost immediately and get rid of this almost immediately, this is interesting. It's cool design, but I don't think it's really that difficult. And then you're shuffling in the cyborg tech. Attach the minion with the most traits. And since Lucia von Bardis is a criminal cyborg elite, it's probably going to be her if she's in play. Otherwise, it's just going to surge. So this won't go on the villain. And it gives +3 hit points and retaliate 1. So sometimes I wish, the Nemesis minions would come into play with their signature attachment because they're very interesting and they make the Nemesis so much worse. But since you pretty much almost always kill the Nemesis immediately if possible, then usually these types of cards just end up surging and they're so much less interesting than they could be. Now, it does have a boost where it's going to end up as an extra face down encounter card, which is ultimately going to lead to a surge. So it's actually much worse as a boost. And then Political Retribution, if Lucia is in play, she's going to scheme, which she might be scheming for 2 or 3. And if the side scheme is in play, place 3 threat on it. So that's just going to be that much longer. It's going to be accelerating or hazarding. And if you've gotten rid of both of these like you should, then this just surges. So not that big of a deal. So I really like the internal synergy of this one. It all works together very well. It doesn't particularly interact with Ironheart that much, but it's certainly an interesting one, and it's not nothing. You're going to have to spend a decent amount of resources dealing with it. That's almost a Shrug, but the fact that she gets tough, and if you don't kill her right away, she's going to get another tough, which those can actually be annoying to deal with. That is a very light sigh. Let me get this nonsense. The Green Gobbler, who's actually really, really bad. 4 health, 2 attack. That's not too bad. But he engages you, you discard all counters from each card you control. This can be heartbreaking. If you're playing Spider-Ham, you do not want to see shadows because, you're building up those tune counters and this is going to take all of them away. But if you happen to have other cards in play like Command Team or Energy Barrier, it's going to get rid of all of those too. And this could be horrible when he comes out. He's not very hard to deal with, but it's when it engages you. So the damage is already done. He took away all your extra resources and very possibly other good cards from you. So that is very bad. And then his side scheme, 3 threat hazard. When you defeat it, if Gobbler is in play, he's going to attack you. If not, you have to go get him, which is going to cause you to lose all your tokens again. And the fact that it's a hazard means you're going to want to deal with it. So you actually want to deal with this while the Green Gobbler is still in play. And he's going to hit you for 2, no big deal. But you don't want to pull him out again to steal all your tokens again. So that's pretty mean. And then you get these Feast on This that get shuffled in. It's going to deal 2 damage to you, which you're actually happy to see because you're going to get a tune counter. And then it's going to confuse you, which isn't great. And then the glider is going to surge no matter what. And then it either goes on the Gobbler or another minion, but it won't go on the villain. And it gives the minion aerial trait. I don't think that will ever matter for anything, but it is funny. And it's just a +1/+1. So most of the rest of this isn't that bad. Like these cards, you're actually happy to see these. And this does basically a surge. But when he comes out, you're very, very sad to see it. It's not a scoop. Like, it's not going to ruin your day, most likely. But it definitely it's a feel bad enough moment that it's definitely a sigh. Like that's going to be an actual literal, like you are unhappy to see this stupid green gobbler. So it's not a shrug, even though he's not very hard to deal with because he already just made you sad. All right, it's Morbin time with Morbius here from the SPDR hero. And this guy is a problem. 6 health, 2 scheme, 2 attack, and it says after the engaged hero generates any number of resources, deal an equal amount of damage to that hero. So once he comes out, anything you're going to want to play from your hand that costs resources, you're going to take a damage for each one, and he has 6 health. So if you happen to have your attack upgrade in play, and you happen to have your readying upgrade in play, you can attack him for 4, ready up, and finish him off without spending any resources. I actually did that in a video recently. But if we're talking about early in the game, and SPDR didn't happen to get one of her magical, amazingly fast setups that she surprisingly often gets, then he's going to deal a lot of damage to you before you manage to kill him. It might take a turn or two to get rid of him, and you're probably going to have to spend some resources from your hand to kill him, which is going to deal extra damage to you. Like if you want to hit him with a web trap, which won't be enough to kill him, that's going to deal 2 damage to you because you generated resources. So I think if he comes out early, which is again kind of what we're talking about, that is a real trouble. And then we have a 4 threat crisis, which is pretty high for a crisis. And you have to spend an extra lightning resource every time you want to thwart it. So if it takes a couple thwarting actions to get rid of this, you're going to spending a bunch of extra resources. Like these are really slowing you down. And SPDR is trying her best to get a fast start. And then these are really going to interfere with you. And then it adds the energy drains that cause you to spend 2 lightning resources or either exhaust your identity or deal 3 damage to you. SPDR has a ton of health. So I don't think these are that bad. I think these are pretty weak encounter cards compared to other things you could be seeing. They're not great by any means, but there's definitely worse things. But I think if you see this early in the game, this is going to slow you down enough that you're already trying to get set up and, manage the board long enough to stay in the game to win. I think I'm going to call this a scoop. It's kind of a light scoop because SPDR does get set up really fast most of the time. But I think more often than not, that's going to cause you real problems if you see that early. And then from here, out came Mutant Genesis. We'll talk about Kitty Pryde's Nemesis, the White Queen. Absolutely horrendous. 5 health, 1 scheme, 1 attack, but she's villainous. Villainous, always bad. And then while she's engaged with you, you are just confused. Now, this has caused some rules questions, but the way this works is anytime you are confused, you always put a confused counter on you. And then even after you defeat her, you still have to clear the confused token. Even though it seems like this is just creating some sort of constant effect where you just are confused while she's with you. The words you are confused, there's actually a rule for that. When it says that, you put a confused counter on, you put a confused status card on you. So you can't thwart the entire time she's engaged with you. And then even after you defeat her, you still have to clear your confused. So it's a huge pain. She's not that hard to kill though. Kitty's pretty strong, but until you do, the threat is going to be difficult to manage. And then she has this side scheme where it's only 2 threat, but when you defeat it, you have to go get one of these annoying pawn minions. It's acceleration. Like that's not too bad because you get these guys. They have guard, patrol, and surge, and this doesn't reveal them though. So defeating this is just going to bring one into play. So at least he won't surge. These are pretty wimpy, and they have guard and patrol, which really is a fun way to interact with Kitty's kit because she can easily ignore those and then maybe hit them with her 1 upgrade. So they're not too bad. But everything here is really designed to slow you down. You're going to be confused for a turn or 2 at least, probably. And then these have patrol, so while these are in play, you also can't thwart. So this is really going to be advancing the scheme, which makes perfect sense for the White Queen and the Heckfire Club. They're all about scheming and advancing their plans. So I love the way it plays into the theme of that. It's very, very well done. And I also love the theme of just Kitty just really doesn't like Emma, or at least she didn't for a really long time. If you don't know, in the comics, Emma Frost has been a hero for quite a while, actually, probably longer than she was a villain. Oh, maybe not, but for a long time. And, Kitty was always very mistrustful, rightly so. But over time, they've really become friends. It's a really interesting relationship with those two. So I love that this was her nemesis. And then there is this attachment that goes on your identity, and it causes you to be stunned, and it has the same wording as this. So as long as it's on you, you're going to have a stun status card. And then even after you spend the resources to discard this, you're still going to need to clear your stun. So this all slows you down quite a bit. I haven't had to deal with this, actually. I played Kitty more than any of the other X-Men, and I guess I've just gotten lucky. I never got shadows with her. So I can't speak from experience, but just looking at the cards is definitely not great. You know, I think there are enough annoying effects in here. I'm going to call this a hard Sigh. I don't know. This, I'll admit, I don't have any experience with that. I know people have talked very badly about this one, so maybe this one's harder than I'm giving it credit for. I'm going to say it's on the harder side of Sigh. Maybe it's a scoop. I don't know. But you know what is a scoop? Juggernaut. Juggernaut's a scoop. You see this guy in the first few turns of the game. Start over. 4 attack, stalwart, toughness, 8 health. What the heck? I know Colossus has cards that can kind of deal with this, but still. And he's adding an overkill and piercing boost effect to the encounter deck. Like, this is horrible. And Colossus, I haven't played him a ton, but certainly in solo, I know he has kind of a hard time getting started. So if you see this early enough in the game, that's really, really going to interfere with what you're trying to do. And then he gets his side scheme out with 2 threat amplify. I don't think amplify is that bad. I know it's giving the villain +1/+1, but I think a hazard or a crisis is worse. It's going to discard each tough status card from each friendly character, and then it's going to put extra threat here, which, similar to some of the ones I said earlier, War Machine, She-Hulk, I don't think Colossus is super good at thwarting, so that amplify is going to be in play for a while, and it's going to eat all your toughs, which, if Colossus loses all his toughs, it's hard for him to get going again. These 2 copies of Unstoppable, that are either going to go on a big minion, or they're going to search, they don't go on the villain. And it gives the attack, overkill, and piercing with +2, so again, your toughs go away. And then the slammed is going to stun you, and as a boost effect, it gets revealed, so it's going to be an extra encounter card. Yeah, this is a hard scoop. This one is terrifyingly bad. I think if you see this early, you are done. Colossus would never scoop, he'd never give up, but I don't think he's going to win that game either. Out next was Cyclops, and here's another interesting obligation I wanted to quickly talk about. This one's going to steal your Ruby Quartz visor and tuck it under this card. And then you simply just can't attack while he doesn't have his visor, which is kind of amusing because you can attack in the game without having your visor in play. But not if it got stolen by this. Then you can't attack anymore. And you have to exhaust him in Alter Ego, which isn't that big of a deal. Scott likes going to Alter Ego anyway to get it into your hand. But this one can be nice if you haven't found your visor yet. This could be an easy way to actually tutor it up for you. So that one's not too bad. And then we get Mr. Sinister here, who this guy could easily be a villain and likely will be, hopefully in the near future, very soon. So his Nemesis set should be very, very difficult, or at least the minion, 6 health, 1 attack and 1 scheme, but he's got villainous, so that's definitely bad. Stalwart and toughness, so he's definitely going to be a problem to deal with. You know, Cyclops, a couple optic blasts will take him out once you remove the toughness, so he's not impossible by any means, but he's pretty tough. And he has a bad boost effect that's just going to stun you, so that's not good. And then his side scheme only has 2 threat amplify, but when you defeat it, and you're probably going to want to because it's an amplify, you have to go get the gene therapy. I always like the design of the side schemes that have a bad symbol, like a hazard or a crisis or an amplify, and then they have a when defeated effect. So like you have to get rid of the side scheme because you don't want this in play, but then it's going to hit you with something else. I always think that's really smart. And then if you do defeat it, you're going to go get this gene therapy. It's going to go on the enemy with the lowest printed attack, which, you know, they did that because Sinister is only 1, but it might go on the villain. And it's going to give the attached character +2 attack and overkill and piercing, and then it gets discarded. So it's very similar to Juggernaut's, actually. But that's a pretty mean card. You know, with overkill and piercing, this is pretty much a guaranteed hit you're going to take from the villain that's going to be boosted by 2, so that's going to be really nasty. And then he also has this concussive force. If Mr. Sinister is in play, he's going to attack you, which, again, with villainous and possibly +2 overkill and piercing. Otherwise, you just take 2 damage or place 2 threat on the main scheme. So I haven't encountered this one. Similar to what I said in the solo hero rankings, I have not played the X-Men nearly enough. It's just been a busy time for me with channel stuff. So not speaking from experience here, this doesn't look terrifying to me, just having read all these other cards. It's not nothing for sure. A stalwart toughness villainous minion with 6 health is not nothing. It's not a shrug. It doesn't feel like a scoop to me. So that is where that is going to go. He is just a sigh. And certainly every single time Scott Summers has to deal with Mr. Sinister, it is a big sigh. This guy is a menace, always showing up in the comics, and he's just obsessed with Scott and Jean, trying to get their genes to turn into like super mutants and stuff like that. So he's actually one of my favorite villains story-wise, but the X-Men always sigh when this guy shows up. And then we come to what has got to be the best designed Obligation and Nemesis set, right? This is just the coolest thing. This is actually the thing that makes Jean Grey more interesting than her hero kit. I don't say that to be mean. Her hero kit is just so sort of all over the place. It doesn't feel like it has like a unified theme. So the biggest thing when playing Jean is just trying to avoid her obligation and Shadows of the Past. So you have the obligation that if you have the Unleashed trait, it's going to bring out your Nemesis, which is super, super bad. We'll talk about it in a second. But if you're restrained, it's going to move you closer to becoming Unleashed, and then it gets discarded. At least it's not like the Ironheart one, a minor setback that gets shuffled back into the deck. I almost kind of wish it did, but then it would be really, really mean. It's already hard enough to avoid the Dark Phoenix, but it almost feels like this should have gotten shuffled back into the encounter deck, but either way. So, but yeah, this card is what, when you're playing Jean, you know, you really want to go to the Unleashed because your cards are so much more powerful. But as long as your obligation is still in the deck, similar to Ghost Spiders, you know, you always have to be very aware of that, and it's going to affect how you play. Now, Shadows is in the deck, so whether you hit this or not, you could still just get Shadows, and none of that will matter. But of course, that's worth mentioning. It's so cool. And then we come to the Dark Phoenix herself. 12 health, steady, toughness, and villainous. I'm actually surprised she doesn't have Stalwart. This is one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, but, you know, not that big of a deal. 2 scheme, 2 attack. And when she does scheme, she's going to put the threat on the Consume the World, which we'll talk about in a second. And then when she comes out, she's going to bring this Consume the World side scheme into play. So she has 12 health. And even if you are Unleashed when this comes out, your cards are strong, but they're not quite strong enough to deal with a 12 health minion immediately. So in solo, this is really, really going to cause you some problems. And then you also need to be very cognizant of this Consume the World side scheme. It's permanent. You can't get rid of it. It has an amplify as long as there's threat on it. And this starts with 6 threat. And if it ever gets to 12, everybody just loses. Like, this is literally just another loss condition. So you're just trying to stop Claw from stealing some weapons. And then Phoenix came out and ate the whole world. Love, love, love the theme of that. But the one thing about it is it's not that scary, because the only way threat gets put on here is if Dark Phoenix schemes. So, you know, don't let her do that. And then it does add these Fiery Rage cards to the encounter deck that they have peril, so they're pretty difficult to like cancel and stuff. And if Dark Phoenix is in play, and she might be because she's real hard to get rid of, she's going to activate against you. So you're getting 3 extra activations for Dark Phoenix. And if she's not in play, it just places 1 threat on Consume the World and surges. So I haven't had to deal with this, but I feel like it would be really, really hard for this to get to 12 threat. If this just accumulated threat like normal, then I could see that being a real problem. But, you know, it's not like they want to make it so easy to lose the game. I get why it's not like that. But I don't think it's that big of a threat. The bigger thing is just you want to keep it at 0 so it doesn't have the amplify, because you can't get rid of it. So that's really more what these are doing. It's not so much that this is going to cause you to lose the game. It's probably not. But it is going to be a little bit difficult to keep that amplify off, or at least you're going to have to constantly be putting resources towards it. Now, all that being said, obviously this is a scoop, right? Like, if I didn't make this a scoop, like, yes, I know you can deal with it, but if this comes out early in the game, it's just gonna make the rest of the game so much harder. Even if you do manage to kill her, now you constantly have to manage this. And if she does come out again, you gotta kill her again. So yes, that is 100% a scoop. You do not want to see that ever, but certainly early in the game, you are absolutely toast if you see your Shadows. Or if you play Phoenix like me, where I get Unleashed as fast as I can, because whatever, if it happens, it happens. But I want to play with those awesome cards. Somehow I've never bumped into her in the way I play, so I guess I've just gotten very lucky that I never gotten the obligation or Shadows, but I've only played Phoenix maybe 3 times, so I guess that's why. So we've got a couple left here. We're almost done. We look at Wolverine's Omega Red here. I like this one quite a bit. It's got 8 health, which, oh my gosh, a Nemesis minion with 8 health, but, you know, Wolverine can just lunging strike this thing to death, no problem. Except he can't while this side scheme is in play, because Omega Red can't be defeated. It's a 5 threat with acceleration, so he's actually not that easy to get rid of. He has Retaliate 1 and Steady, which Wolverine I don't think has any. Stun or Confuse, so I'm not quite sure why he has Steady, other than he's just a major villain. But when he attacks you, deal 1 damage to each character you control, so it's going to eat up your allies a little bit and just deal, you know, some extra damage to Wolverine, which is really why I think that's there. But yeah, the big thing is you need to be able to remove this 5 threat side scheme. Now, thankfully, Wolverine actually shouldn't have too much trouble with that. He has his thwart card, can remove 3 of it, and then he can thwart for 2. So he could hypothetically easily remove this when it comes out and then lunging strike Omega Red to death. So this is definitely deal with a bull for Wolverine, but I think they did a good job of trying to make this pretty difficult, because Wolverine definitely needs that to be the case. And then he has this Tentacle Strike that gets added to the deck that's just going to stun you and deal some damage, potentially a lot of damage. You know, Wolverine definitely doesn't want to be stunned, but he also has those cards that can remove his status effect. So it interacts with Wolverine's kit nicely. And then he has 2 copies of Death Factor they're going to attach to you, and it's just going to deal some extra damage every turn. And it basically forces you to make a basic recovery, and you don't get the healing. You just have to flip down and exhaust, basically, to get rid of this. So not something Wolverine wants to be doing. So I think overall they did a really good job with this, that it really interacts with Wolverine's kit. It definitely causes him some problems, but it's not a scoop. He can handle this, and he should be able to because he's Wolverine. He's really strong. This is one of the better designed ones, I think. Not that they aren't, most of them are, but I think this is on the upper end of good design. And then finally, we come to Storm. This is actually one of my favorite Nemesis encounter sets. I think this one's really cool. You get a 3 attack minion with Quick Strike. That's rough. That is rough. And then if she happens to be in play when a Knife Fight Treachery is revealed, she gets a tough stats card. And we'll take a look at that in a sec. But real quick, the side scheme here has 2 threat with an Amplify. And the player who defeated this scheme searches the encounter deck, discard pile, and set aside area for a Knife Fight. So you got to get rid of this because it has an Amplify, but this is going to cause you to get the Knife Fight and reveal it, which choose an enemy with the highest attack, take damage equal to its attack, and deal damage to that enemy equal to your attack. So you're basically just trading your attack values, but it's so awesome because if Callisto's in play, that's 3 damage you're going to take, but then you can hit her back. Hopefully you have Thunderstorm in play, so you can hit her for 3 back. But even if not, you're still going to be dealing damage back and forth to the villain. I just think the theme of this is absolutely incredible, especially if you know Storm. Storm was the leader of the Morlocks for a while. She fought Callisto to take control because Callisto was being not a very nice leader. And so just a really interesting relationship between the 2 characters. So really, really like how this is designed. And then Switchblade goes on the minion. Otherwise, it surges. This doesn't go on the villain. And then it gets +2 attack and piercing. This card, you know, if this goes on a minion, you're just going to kill that minion. So it's not great, especially if it does end up on Callisto. And then you do get the Knife Fight. I love how these cards could potentially combo together. And when these Nemesis sets work out that way, you know, over the course of a longer game, probably a multiplayer game, it's theoretically possible that Callisto could get this Switchblade and the Knife Fight comes out, she's going to deal 5 damage. That's just awesome. So even though these things don't often happen in practice, I love that in theory they could take place. And that is so much fun. And so that is the fun of looking at these. Even if we don't get to play against them very often, we definitely need to take a look at these cards because they are so well designed. There's so much, I think there's more flavor in these Nemesis sets than most of the other encounter cards in the game. So I'm really glad we took the time to do this. That is the last one, and we are going to call that's right in the middle. It's a pretty tough Sigh. Like, she's going to come out, she's probably going to hit you for 3. She's going to add some pretty difficult cards to the encounter deck. So it's not a scoop, but it is not a light Sigh. So when it all comes down to it, there were 8 that I thought were a little bit too easy, 13 that I thought were a little bit on the harder side, which of course leaves 19 that are right in the middle. So based on my opinion alone, about half of them are right where I think they should be. And then some are a little bit, maybe not too hard. Like, I don't think Dark Phoenix is too hard. She should be hard, but some of them like Groot and Hulk certainly are way harder than they need to be for the strength of the heroes. And then other ones are just particularly troublesome, like She-Hulk's and Thor's. So it's not that I think they made them too hard. It's just some of them really, really caused the hero some problems. It's really these that I'm a little bit sadder about, that they're just too easy, especially because they're pretty much all for really strong heroes. Nova is really strong. Okay, Drax isn't necessarily overly strong, but Rocket's pretty strong. Wasp. Okay, mainly it's Spider-Woman, Captain Marvel, and Captain America are on the stronger end. You think they would have had harder ones. Black Widow's is kind of a joke. So, and I don't mean that anything negative against the designers or anything. That's just how it worked out. But overall, I think they are exceptionally well made. And some of them are going to be worse in multiplayer than solo. And this was just my criteria anyway. So, but that was really, really fun to take a look at those. It's definitely not anything I've ever spent enough time thinking about. And there's not a lot of media covering it. So I'm glad we had the opportunity to do this. So I thank you so very much, the 1,300 people who have been kind enough to press that subscribe button. That gave me the incentive to come up with something new to talk about that I wasn't planning on. And again, I invite you to subscribe and join along at the channel if you would like to see more of this. Also, if you wouldn't mind liking the video, that's just very, very helpful for me. And I'm going to wrap it up right here. I thank you so very much for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you next time we get up in game. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.